The certified letter from the HOA arrived on October 3rd, demanding I remove my Halloween decorations within 48 hours or face a $500 daily fine. And I knew right then that Karren Winters, our neighborhood association president, had finally crossed the line. I stood on my front porch in Maple Grove, Illinois, staring at the official notice with its embossed letterhead and pretentious language. My name, Owen Nelson, was typed in bold letters across the top like I was some kind of criminal. The decoration they were complaining about was a 12-foot inflatable Grim Reaper that I'd positioned next to my maple tree, along with some tombstones, spider webs, and orange string lights wrapped around the porch railings. Nothing obscene, nothing dangerous, just classic Halloween fun. My daughter Emma had helped me set everything up the previous weekend. She was 8 years old and absolutely loved Halloween. We'd spent hours arranging each piece, making sure the fog machine created just the right amount of atmosphere without spilling onto the sidewalk. She'd been so proud when we finished, taking photos to show her mom during their next video call. My ex-wife lived in Colorado now, and these holiday decorations had become one of the ways Emma and I bonded. The letter claimed my display violated Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws regarding excessive seasonal decorations that detract from neighborhood aesthetics. I'd lived in this subdivision for 6 years and had read those bylaws front to back when I bought the house. Section 4.7 said nothing about Halloween specifically. It mentioned that Christmas lights couldn't stay up past January 15th, and that yard ornaments should be tasteful and maintained. But there was nothing about size limits or quantity restrictions for temporary holiday displays. I pulled out my phone and called my neighbor Marcus Chen, who lived 3 houses down. He answered on the second ring. "Did you get a letter?" I asked. "About what?" "Your Halloween stuff. Did the HOA send you anything?" "No, why? What happened?" I explained the situation while walking back inside my house. Through my kitchen window, I could see Marcus's yard, which had even more decorations than mine, including a projection system that displayed ghosts on his garage door and a whole graveyard scene complete with a skeletal dog. "That's insane," Marcus said. "I haven't gotten anything. Let me check my mail." I waited, listening to the sound of his door opening and closing. When he came back on the line, he confirmed he had no letter. "So she's targeting me specifically," I said. "Looks that way." "You want me to ask around, see who else got letters?" "Yeah, that would help." Over the next hour, Marcus texted me updates. He'd contacted 12 families on our street who had Halloween decorations up. Not a single one had received a complaint letter, just me. This wasn't the first time Karren Winters had singled me out. Last spring, she'd sent me a violation notice because my grass was allegedly 3.5 inches tall when the maximum allowed height was 3 inches. I'd measured it myself with a ruler and found it was actually 2 3/4 inches. When I showed up at the monthly HOA meeting with photographic evidence and measurements, she dismissed it as a misunderstanding, but never apologized. Then in July, she tried to fine me for parking my work truck in my driveway overnight. I was a general contractor, and my truck had my company logo on the side. She claimed it was a commercial vehicle and therefore banned from residential driveways between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. I'd pointed out that Section 8.2 of the bylaws only prohibited commercial vehicles used for hauling materials or equipment, and my truck was empty. She'd backed down but had glared at me throughout that entire meeting. The pattern was clear. Karren had it out for me, though I'd never understood why. I kept my property maintained, paid my HOA dues on time, and generally minded my own business. My best guess was that she'd taken offense to something I'd said at a meeting 2 years ago, when she'd proposed raising the monthly dues by 40% to fund a decorative brick entrance gate for the subdivision. I'd argued that the money would be better spent fixing the pothole-riddled streets, and several other homeowners had agreed with me. The gate proposal had been voted down, and Karren had seemed to take it personally. I scanned the letter and emailed it to James Rodriguez, a real estate attorney who'd helped me with my home purchase. We'd stayed friends, occasionally meeting up for basketball at the local rec center. He called me back 30 minutes later. "This letter is garbage," James said without preamble. "The bylaw they're citing doesn't support their claim. You're well within your rights to have those decorations up. So I can ignore it. Technically, yes. But they can still take you to arbitration or file a lawsuit. It would be baseless, but it would cost you time and money to defend yourself." "That's ridiculous." "Welcome to HOA law. Listen, you have options. You can request a hearing with the board, which they're required to grant you. You can also gather evidence that your decorations don't violate any actual rules and present it to them. If they proceed with fines, you can dispute them. How long does all that take? The hearing should happen within 2 weeks if you request it in writing. But Owen, I'll be honest, this seems personal. Is there something going on between you and the board president?" I explained the history with Karren Winters. James listened without interrupting. "Okay, so she's got it out for you. That actually works in your favor. If you can prove she's selectively enforcing rules against you while ignoring the same behavior from other homeowners, that's discrimination. It won't hold up legally. So what do I do? Document everything. Take photos of every Halloween display in the neighborhood. Note the dates. Get statements from other homeowners if you can. Request a formal hearing, and don't take down your decorations. If you do, it looks like you're admitting fault." That evening, Emma came home from school and immediately noticed something was wrong. She'd inherited my ability to read people, which was both a blessing and a curse for an 8-year-old. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, dropping her backpack by the door. I showed her the letter, reading it aloud but simplifying some of the legal language. Her face fell. "They want us to take down our decorations, Mrs. Winters does, but we're not going to." "But what if they make us?" I knelt down to her level. "They can't make us, sweetheart. We didn't break any rules. Sometimes adults have disagreements, and this is one of those times. But I promise you our Halloween decorations are staying up." She hugged me tightly. "I worked really hard on those. I know you did. And everyone who walks by loves them. Mrs. Patterson told me yesterday that her grandson asks to drive down our street every day just to see our yard." That was true. Ellen Patterson lived around the corner and had stopped me at the mailbox 2 days earlier to share that detail. Her 4-year-old grandson had apparently memorized every element of our display and talked about it constantly. The next morning, I sent a certified letter to the HOA board requesting a formal hearing to dispute the violation notice. I spent my lunch break driving through the neighborhood with my phone, taking videos of every Halloween display. Marcus had been right about his decorations being more extensive than mine, but there were others that rivaled both of us. The Sullivan family, 4 streets over, had converted their entire front yard into a haunted carnival, complete with a ticket booth and animatronic clowns. The Hendersons had a 15-foot inflatable dragon breathing LED fire. The Kowalskis had so many tombstones it looked like an actual cemetery. I documented 23 properties with Halloween decorations, many of them more elaborate than mine. Not one of those homeowners had received a complaint letter. That Friday, I received confirmation that my hearing was scheduled for October 17th at 7 p.m. in the subdivision clubhouse. The board meeting was open to all residents, which meant I could have witnesses present. Marcus offered to come and bring photos of his own decorations. Ellen Patterson said she'd attend and speak about how much the neighborhood kids enjoyed the Halloween displays. Within 2 days, I had 7 neighbors who'd volunteered to show up in support. On October 10th, I received another letter from Karren Winters, this time sent via regular mail. It informed me that since I hadn't complied with the original notice, I was now being fined $500 per day starting October 5th. According to her math, I currently owed $1,500. I forwarded the letter to James, who called me immediately. "They can't enforce this," he said. "You requested a hearing. They can't levy fines while a dispute is pending. Save this letter. It actually helps your case because it shows they're not following their own procedures." The weekend before my hearing, something unexpected happened. I woke up Saturday morning to find my doorbell ringing persistently. When I answered, I found a woman in her mid-30s holding a clipboard and wearing a bright smile. "Hi, I'm Jennifer Torres from the Maple Grove Community Newsletter," she said. "I'm doing a piece on the best Halloween decorations in the neighborhood, and several people mentioned your house. Would you be willing to answer a few questions?" I'd seen the newsletter before. It was a free monthly publication that got delivered to every house in our subdivision and the 2 adjacent neighborhoods. It mostly covered local events, business advertisements, and feel-good community stories. "Sure," I said, still a bit groggy. Emma appeared behind me, curious about the visitor. Jennifer asked about our inspiration for the decorations, how long they'd taken to set up, and what Halloween meant to us. Emma enthusiastically explained every element of the display, from the fog machine timer to the specific angles we'd chosen for the spotlights. Jennifer took notes and photos, clearly charmed by Emma's excitement. "This is wonderful," Jennifer said. "You two clearly put a lot of love into this. I think our readers will really enjoy this story." After she left, I thought nothing more of it. I was focused on preparing for the hearing. On October 15th, the newsletter arrived. On the front page, there was a large color photo of our house with the Halloween decorations fully lit up. The headline read, "Father-daughter team creates magical Halloween display." The article was warm and detailed, highlighting how Emma and I had bonded over the project and mentioning several neighbors who'd praised the decorations. Ellen Patterson was quoted saying it had brought joy and community spirit to the neighborhood. The article was also posted on the newsletter's Facebook page, which had over 3,000 followers from the local area. By that evening, it had been shared 200 times. On Monday morning, Marcus called me laughing. "Have you seen the Facebook comments?" I hadn't. I pulled up the post and scrolled through. Most comments were supportive and sweet, with people praising the decorations and sharing their own Halloween memories. But then, I noticed a comment thread that had blown up. Karren Winters had written, "This display violates our neighborhood covenants and detracts from property values. The HOA has issued violations." The responses to her comment were brutal. People from inside and outside the neighborhood were calling her out. Someone had pointed out that many houses had similar decorations. Another person shared a photo of the Sullivans' haunted carnival with the caption, "Are you going after this house too, or just discriminating against specific residents?" A woman named Patricia Moore had written an entire paragraph defending me. "Owen Nelson is one of the kindest people in this neighborhood. He helped my elderly father clean his gutters last year and refused payment. He's raising his daughter alone and doing a wonderful job. These decorations hurt no one and bring happiness to children. This HOA overreach is exactly what gives homeowner associations a bad name." I didn't know Patricia more personally, though I vaguely remembered helping an older gentleman with his gutters. I hadn't realized it was her father. The post continued getting attention throughout Monday and Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, it had over 1,000 comments and had been shared more than 800 times. Local news website picked up the story with the headline, HOA targets Halloween decorations, Internet fights back. My phone started ringing with calls from people I barely knew, offering support. Emma's teacher emailed me to say that several students had been talking about our decorations and asking if the class could do a unit on Halloween traditions. The attention was overwhelming, but it also felt validating. For years, I dealt with Karen's petness alone, wondering if I was being too sensitive or unreasonable. Seeing hundreds of people recognize the situation for what it was gave me confidence going into the hearing. October 17th arrived. I dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt, wanting to look professional but not overly formal. James had offered to come represent me, but I declined. This wasn't a legal proceeding yet, and I wanted to handle it myself. The subdivision clubhouse was a modest single-story building with a main meeting room, a small kitchen, and 2 bathrooms. HOA meetings were typically sparsely attended, with maybe 10 or 15 people showing up. When I arrived at 10 minutes before 7, the parking lot was already full. Cars lined the street in both directions. Inside, every chair was occupied. People stood along the walls and crowded near the doorway. I estimated at least 100 people had shown up. I recognized most of them as neighbors, but there were also unfamiliar faces, probably from adjacent subdivisions or people who'd followed the story online. Marcus waved me over to a saved seat in the front row. Ellen Patterson sat beside him, along with the Hendersons, the Kowalskis, and several other homeowners I'd documented with Halloween decorations. At the front of the room, Karren Winters sat at a folding table with 4 other board members. She looked furious. Her face was red, and she was whispering urgently to the man beside her, Vice President Donald Marsh, who looked extremely uncomfortable. The other board members were Treasurer Rebecca Yates, Secretary Tom Hanson, and at-large member Linda Crawford. I'd met all of them at previous meetings, but had only had substantive conversations with Linda, who'd always seemed reasonable. At 7 o'clock sharp, Karren banged a gavel on the table. This meeting will come to order. I want to remind everyone that this is a formal HOA board hearing, not a public forum. Comments from the gallery will not be permitted unless specifically invited. Someone in the back shouted, "That's not how open meetings work." Karen's face got redder. Anyone who disrupts this proceeding will be asked to leave. Donald leaned over and whispered something to her. She looked like she wanted to argue but instead took a deep breath. "Fine. We'll allow public comment after the board hears from Mr. Nelson and deliberates, but there will be order." She shuffled some papers in front of her. "We're here tonight to address a violation notice issued to Owen Nelson of 847 Willow Lane regarding excessive Halloween decorations. Mr. Nelson, you requested this hearing. You have 10 minutes to present your case." I stood and walked to the front of the room. I'd brought printed copies of the relevant bylaw sections, my documentation of other homes with decorations, and the timeline of Karen's previous complaints against me. "Thank you for hearing me tonight," I began. "I want to start by reading Section 4.7 of our HOA bylaws, which is the section cited in my violation notice." I read the section aloud, then explained. "As you can hear, this section says nothing about Halloween decorations specifically. It doesn't mention size limits for holiday displays or quantity restrictions. It simply states that yard ornaments should be tasteful and maintained. My decorations are both. They're well secured, They're appropriate for the holiday, and they're maintained daily to ensure everything functions properly. I projected photos on the wall using a small portable projector I'd borrowed from work. These are pictures of 23 other homes in our subdivision with Halloween decorations. Many of these displays are larger and more elaborate than mine. Not one of these homeowners received a violation notice. The photos cycled through. Murmurs ran through the crowd as people recognized their own homes or their neighbors' houses. This is selective enforcement, I continued. The HOA board, specifically Miss Winters, has targeted me while ignoring identical behavior from other residents. This isn't the first time. I've brought documentation of 3 previous violation notices I've received, all of which were either factually incorrect or applied inconsistently. I distributed copies to each board member. Karren didn't look at hers. Finally, I want to address the impact of these decorations. I have a statement from Ellen Patterson about how they've brought joy to neighborhood children. I have messages from 17 families thanking me for creating a festive atmosphere. I have photos of kids posing in front of my yard with their parents' permission. These decorations aren't detracting from the neighborhood, they're enhancing it. I returned to my seat. I'd spoken for exactly 8 minutes. Karren immediately spoke up. "The board is well aware of the bylaws, Mr. Nelson. We don't need them read to us. The fact is, your display is excessive and creates a carnival atmosphere inappropriate for a residential area." "Where in the bylaws does it say that?" I asked. "The bylaws are subject to interpretation by the board." "Interpretation based on what standard?" "Because by any objective measure, my decorations are no different from dozens of others in this neighborhood." Donald cleared his throat. "Karren, maybe we should discuss this amongst the board before going further." She shot him a look. "I don't think there's anything to discuss. The violation stands." Linda Crawford spoke up for the first time. "I'd like to hear from the other board members. Rebecca, Tom, what are your thoughts?" Rebecca Yates looked nervous but said, "I drive by Mr. Nelson's house regularly. I think the decorations are lovely. My kids love them. And I have to say, I'm concerned about the selective enforcement issue. If we're going to cite one house, we need to be consistent." Tom Hansen nodded. "I agree. I don't see how we can justify this violation when we haven't issued similar notices to other homes." Karren's face had gone from red to almost purple. "We don't have to justify anything. The board has the authority to enforce standards as we see fit." "That's not actually true," said a voice from the crowd. James had shown up after all. He stood and identified himself. "Illinois law requires HOA boards to enforce covenants and restrictions uniformly. Selective enforcement can invalidate the enforcement entirely and potentially expose the board to liability." Karren pointed at him. "You're not a party to this proceeding. Sit down. This is an open meeting." "I have the right to speak during public comment." Donald put his hand on Karren's arm. "Let's take a 5-minute recess so the board can discuss this privately." The 5 board members retreated to the small kitchen area. Through the closed door we could hear raised voices, though the words were indistinct. Karren was clearly doing most of the yelling. Marcus leaned over. "She's losing it." "She lost it a long time ago," I said. When the board returned, Karren looked like she'd been crying. Her mascara was slightly smudged and her jaw was clenched tight. The other 4 members looked grim. Donald spoke instead of Karren. "The board has deliberated. We've decided to rescind the violation notice against Mr. Nelson. His Halloween decorations don't violate any specific bylaw provision, and in the interest of fairness, we can't enforce standards inconsistently." Relief washed over me. Emma would be thrilled, but Donald wasn't finished. "However, We're going to form a committee to review our bylaws and potentially create more specific guidelines for seasonal decorations going forward. We'll present any proposed changes at the December meeting for a community vote." That seemed reasonable. I nodded my acceptance. Karren stood abruptly. "This is unacceptable. I'm the president of this board and I won't be undermined." Linda looked at her steadily. "You're the president, Karren, but you're not a dictator. The board makes decisions collectively and we just did. Then I quit." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. The crowd parted to let her through, and silence fell over the room until we heard her car start in the parking lot. Donald looked shell-shocked. "Well, that was unexpected. I suppose we'll need to discuss succession at our next regular meeting. For tonight, let's open the floor to public comment." Nearly 20 people spoke. Most expressed support for Halloween decorations and frustration with what they perceived as HOA overreach. A few people suggested abolishing the HOA entirely, which got scattered applause but wasn't legally feasible since it was written into all our property deeds. One woman proposed creating a community Halloween decoration contest, which generated enthusiasm. Ellen Patterson stood and said, "I'd like to nominate Owen Nelson for the vacant board position. I wasn't expecting that. I appreciate it, but I don't think I'm qualified." "You're more qualified than people who abuse the position," Ellen said. Several people clapped. Donald looked relieved to have something positive to focus on. "We can certainly consider that. Anyone interested in joining the board should submit a statement of interest. We'll vote at next month's meeting." The meeting finally ended around 9:30. People came up to shake my hand and congratulate me. Several mentioned they'd been intimidated by Karren in the past and were glad someone had finally stood up to her. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in days. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something on my porch. Getting closer, I saw it was a large handmade banner that read, "Best Halloween House Award." Attached was a note from the Henderson family saying their kids had made it for Emma. Inside, I called Emma, who was staying overnight at my sister's house. She screamed with joy when I told her the decorations could stay up. The next day, the story continued to spread. A local TV news station called and asked if they could film a segment about the Halloween house that won over a neighborhood. I agreed, thinking it would be a quick feel-good piece. The reporter, a friendly guy named Marcus, not to be confused with my neighbor, arrived with a cameraman on October 19th. They filmed the decorations, interviewed Emma and me, and talked to several neighbors. The segment aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. By October 21st, something strange started happening. People from outside the neighborhood began driving by to see the decorations. At first, it was just a few cars here and there. By October 23rd, it was a steady stream every evening. Families would park on the street, walk up to take photos, and sometimes knock on the door to thank us. Emma was in heaven. She'd dress up in different costumes and pose for pictures with visiting kids. I set up a bowl of candy on the porch with a sign saying, "Take one," which people actually respected. On October 25th, Jennifer Torres from the community newsletter called me. "Owen, I have a proposition. We're running our annual Best of Maple Grove Awards in the November issue, where readers vote on various categories. We'd like to add a new category this year, Best Halloween Display. Would you be okay with your house being included?" "Sure, that sounds fun." "Great. We'll include all the houses featured in my original article, plus any others that people nominate. Voting will be online and close on October 30th. I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe a few dozen people would vote, and it would be a nice little community thing. On October 27th, my doorbell rang around 8 p.m. I opened it to find Karren Winters standing on my porch. She looked terrible. Her hair was unkempt, she had dark circles under her eyes, and she was wearing sweatpants and an oversized jacket. "Can I talk to you?" she asked. I hesitated. "I guess so." She stayed on the porch. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, not wanting Emma to overhear whatever this was. "I wanted to apologize," Karren said quietly. "I've been going through a really hard time and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. This was not what I'd expected." "What's going on?" "My husband left me 6 months ago. He'd been having an affair for 2 years. We just finalized the divorce, and he's getting remarried next month to the woman he was cheating with. My kids have taken his side because he has more money and can buy them things. I've been alone in that house feeling like a failure, and I guess I tried to control the only thing I could, which was the HOA. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt bad for her. Another part of me was still angry about months of harassment. "I'm sorry you're going through that," I finally said, "but that doesn't excuse how you treated me." "I know. You're right. I was awful. I saw you with your daughter and you seemed so happy, and I think I resented it because my own family fell apart." "That's not logical, but emotions aren't logical." She wiped her eyes. "I'm moving. I can't stay in this neighborhood after what happened. Everyone hates me, and honestly, I hate myself right now. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry before I go." "Where are you moving to?" "My sister has a condo in Springfield. I'm going to stay with her for a while and figure out my life. The house goes on the market next week." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. "I hope things get better for you," I said, and I meant it. I was angry at what she'd done, but I couldn't help feeling some empathy for someone who was clearly suffering. "Thank you. And Owen, your Halloween decorations really are wonderful. Your daughter is lucky to have you." She walked back to her car and drove away. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner, feeling a strange mix of emotions. The person I'd built up as an antagonist in my mind had turned out to be a broken woman lashing out from pain. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it made it more understandable. On October 30th, Jennifer called me again. "Owen, you need to check the voting results." I pulled up the newsletter's website on my laptop. The Best Halloween Display category had gotten over 4,000 votes. The Sullivan's Haunted Carnival had come in second place with 612 votes. The Henderson's Dragon display had gotten 423 votes. My house had received 2,947 votes. "That's insane," I said. "The story went viral," Jennifer explained. "It got shared on regional news sites, parent forums, even a national HOA watchdog blog. People were voting from all over the state. You've become a symbol of standing up to unreasonable HOA rules." "I just wanted to put up Halloween decorations with my daughter." "I know. That's why people connected with it. The story is authentic. You're not trying to be famous or make a statement. You're just a dad doing something nice with his kid, and people love that." The newsletter published the results in a special online edition that afternoon. By evening, my doorbell was ringing constantly with neighbors stopping by to congratulate me. Marcus brought over a bottle of wine. Ellen Patterson gave me a homemade pie. The Hendersons gifted Emma a giant stuffed ghost. On Halloween night, I estimated that over 300 trick-or-treaters came to our house. Emma helped me hand out candy, wearing an elaborate witch costume we'd worked on together. People were patient and kind, forming an orderly line that stretched down the sidewalk. Several adults thanked me specifically for standing up to the HOA. Around 9 o'clock, as things were winding down, a minivan pulled up and a family of 5 got out. The mother approached the porch while the kids admired the decorations. "Are you Owen Nelson?" she asked. "I am." "I'm Sarah Mitchell." My family lives in a neighborhood in Aurora, about 40 minutes from here. We have an HOA that's been terrorizing residents for years with ridiculous fines and rules. Your story inspired me to run for the board, and I won the election last week. I wanted to thank you in person for giving me the courage to fight back. I was speechless. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Dad, are you famous? Everyone laughed. Not famous, sweetie, just someone who stood up for what's right. But she kind of had a point. Over the next few days, I received emails and messages from people across Illinois and even from other states. Some were dealing with their own HOA problems and wanted advice. Others just wanted to share their own stories of standing up to unreasonable rules. I tried to respond to as many as I could, always emphasizing that I'd just gotten lucky with supportive neighbors and community attention. The November HOA meeting took place on the 15th. The clubhouse was again packed, though not quite as intensely as the October hearing. Donald Marsh had assumed the role of acting president. He started the meeting by addressing Karren's departure. The board accepted Karren Winters' resignation effective October 18th. We want to be clear that while we had disagreements about specific decisions, we wish her well in her future endeavors. That was diplomatic. Linda Crawford then presented the proposed guidelines for seasonal decorations. They were remarkably reasonable. Decorations could go up no earlier than 3 weeks before a holiday and should come down within 1 week after. There were no size limits or quantity restrictions, just requirements that everything be safely installed and maintained. Nothing could block sidewalks or infringe on neighboring properties. The community voted unanimously to adopt the new guidelines. Then came the board election. 7 people had submitted statements of interest for Karren's vacant position. I was one of them, though I'd agonized over the decision. Running for HOA board felt like asking for headaches, but I'd realized during the previous month that the best way to prevent future Karren Winters situations was to be involved in the process. Ellen Patterson gave a speech nominating me that was far more eloquent than I deserved. Marcus seconded it. When the votes were counted, I'd won with 73% support. I took my place at the board table for the remainder of the meeting, feeling surreal about the whole situation. 3 months ago, I'd been a regular homeowner just trying to live my life. Now I was on the board of the organization that had tried to fine me. After the meeting, Linda pulled me aside. "I'm glad you're on board, no pun intended. We need people who understand that the HOA exists to serve the community, not control it." "That's what I'm hoping to focus on," I said. Over the following weeks, life gradually returned to normal. I took down the Halloween decorations on November 3rd, with Emma supervising to make sure we packed everything carefully for next year. The crowds of visiting families stopped coming. The news attention faded. But things had fundamentally changed in the neighborhood. People were more engaged with the HOA. Attendance at meetings stayed high. Residents were paying attention to proposed rules and speaking up when they disagreed. The board became more transparent, posting meeting minutes and budget information on a newly created website. In December, I proposed creating a community events committee to organize seasonal activities. The board approved it unanimously, and Ellen Patterson volunteered to chair it. She organized a Christmas decoration contest for December, with voting done by the whole neighborhood. Unlike the competitive, judgmental atmosphere Karren would have created, Ellen made it fun and inclusive. 15 families participated, and we gave out awards in multiple categories so everyone won something. In January, I received a letter forwarded from the newsletter office. It was from Karren Winters. She wrote that she was settling into her sister's place in Springfield and starting therapy to work through her divorce and anger issues. She'd gotten a job at a local nonprofit and was trying to rebuild her life. She thanked me again for accepting her apology and said she'd been following the neighborhood's progress online. She was glad to see the community thriving. I wrote back, a short note wishing her well and expressing hope that she'd found some peace. I meant it. Holding on to anger wouldn't help anyone. In February, the HOA received a notice that we'd been featured in a statewide community organization newsletter as an example of positive HOA transformation. The article highlighted how our neighborhood had turned a conflict into an opportunity for better governance and community engagement. Donald Marsh framed the article and hung it in the clubhouse. Spring arrived, and with it came new challenges and opportunities for the board. We dealt with budget discussions, street repair proposals, and a minor dispute about chicken ownership that was resolved amicably after we revised the bylaws to allow up to 4 hens per property, with certain safety and maintenance requirements. Throughout it all, I kept thinking about that Halloween decoration controversy and how a simple inflatable Grim Reaper had become a catalyst for change. It had started as something I did with my daughter to celebrate a holiday we both loved. It had turned into a fight against petty tyranny. And it had ultimately transformed into a lesson about community, standing up for yourself, and the importance of reasonable governance. Emma asked me in late March if we were going to go big with Halloween decorations again that year. I told her we'd do whatever made her happy, but probably not add too much more. The decorations had never been about impressing anyone or making a statement. They'd been about spending time together and creating something we could both enjoy. "Can we still do the Grim Reaper?" she asked. "Absolutely. That's staying." In April, Donald Marsh decided to step down from the board due to work commitments. The community held a special election, and Linda Crawford was voted in as president. She was everything Karren hadn't been: collaborative, fair-minded, and focused on serving rather than controlling. At her first meeting as president, she proposed creating an advisory committee of non-board members to review all major decisions before they went to a vote. The motion passed unanimously. I ran into Donald at the grocery store a few weeks later. He told me he'd been relieved to hand over the presidency to Linda. "I never wanted the position," he admitted. "I was vice president under Karren because no one else would do it. She was impossible to work with. Everything was a battle. I stayed because I was worried about what she'd do without any oversight at all." "You did the right thing speaking up at that hearing," I said. "I should have done it sooner. I let things go on too long because I didn't want the confrontation. That's on me." We talked for a few more minutes before going our separate ways. That brief conversation stuck with me. How many HOAs, workplaces, and organizations had people like Donald? Well-meaning individuals who stayed silent because confrontation was uncomfortable. And how did that silence enable people like Karren to abuse their power? I brought it up at the next board meeting. "I think we should create a formal procedure for residents to report concerns about board behavior, something anonymous, so people don't feel intimidated." The board discussed it and agreed. We set up an email address monitored by a rotating board member, where residents could submit concerns or complaints confidentially. We also established a quarterly survey asking residents to rate their satisfaction with HOA management and suggest improvements. These weren't revolutionary ideas, but they represented a shift in how the organization operated. We were actively seeking input rather than imposing rules from above. In June, Jennifer Torres did a follow-up article for the newsletter titled 8 Months Later: How One Halloween Decoration Controversy Changed a Community. She interviewed multiple residents, board members, and even got a quote from Karren Winters, who said she was proud of the positive changes happening in the neighborhood even though she could no longer be part of it. The article concluded, "The Maple Grove HOA has become a model for how homeowner associations can function when they prioritize community well-being over rigid control. It started with one resident refusing to back down from an unreasonable complaint. It continued with neighbors supporting each other, and it's thriving now because everyone learned that participation and accountability matter more than authority and compliance." Emma cut out the article and put it on our refrigerator, right next to her school photos and artwork. Summer brought pool season, which meant the HOA had to manage the neighborhood community pool. In past years under Karren's management, the pool rules had been notoriously strict. No floaties for kids over 5, no food within 50 feet of the water, adult-only swim hours that took up half the day. Linda and the board reviewed all the rules and eliminated the ones that were overly restrictive without serving any real safety purpose. We kept the important stuff like requiring supervision of young children and no glass containers, but we got rid of the petty regulations that had made the pool feel unwelcoming. The result was the busiest, most enjoyable pool season anyone could remember. Families actually wanted to be there. Kids played without constant rule enforcement. Parents could relax and socialize. I spent many afternoons at that pool with Emma and her friends. She'd learned to dive over the winter at the IMCA and was eager to show off her skills. Watching her laugh and play with neighborhood kids, I felt grateful for how everything had turned out. In August, I got a call from a reporter at a Chicago newspaper. She was doing a feature on HOA horror stories and how to fight back, and wanted to include my experience. I agreed to an interview, though I emphasized that my situation had resolved positively because of community support, not because I was special or particularly brave. The article ran in early September and generated another wave of attention. I received messages from people dealing with HOA problems in Texas, Florida, California, and a dozen other states. Some of their stories made my conflict with Karren Winters look minor. People being fined thousands of dollars for trivial violations, elderly residents being foreclosed on over small unpaid fees, communities where the board operated with zero transparency or accountability. I couldn't help everyone, but I started a simple website sharing what I'd learned. Document everything, know your bylaws, seek community support, don't be afraid to push back against unreasonable rules. James Rodriguez helped me with some of the legal information to make sure I wasn't giving bad advice. The website was basic, and I didn't promote it much, but people found it through search engines and social media. As October 2024 rolled around again, Emma and I started planning our Halloween decorations. We decided to add a few new pieces. A witch stirring a cauldron with LED lights that made it look like it was bubbling, some additional path lights shaped like jack-o'-lanterns, and a sound system that played spooky music. When we set everything up on October 5th, exactly 1 year after the original HOA complaint, several neighbors came over to watch and help. Marcus brought his ladder to assist with hanging some decorations from tree branches. Ellen brought cookies. The Henderson kids helped Emma arrange the tombstones. It felt less like decorating a house and more like a community celebration. The newsletter ran a piece about our decorations again, noting the anniversary of the previous year's controversy. This time, there was no drama, no complaints, no conflict, just appreciation for someone putting effort into making the neighborhood festive. On October 15th, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "Owen, I drove by last weekend to see your decorations. They're beautiful. Emma has grown so much. You're a good father and a good person. Thank you for handling last year with grace I didn't deserve. I'm in a better place now, and part of that is because you didn't escalate things vindictively when you had every right to. I hope you and Emma have a wonderful Halloween. Karren." I showed the note to Emma, who asked if Mrs. Winters was the mean HOA lady from last year. "She was going through a hard time and made bad choices," I explained. "But people can change and do better. This note shows she's trying." "Should we send her a picture of our decorations?" Emma asked. "That's a kind idea." We took a photo of the two of us in front of the fully lit display, and I mailed it to Karren's sister's address in Springfield with a brief note saying we hoped she was doing well. 2 weeks later, I received a response. A Halloween card with a photo of Karren at what looked like a charity event, wearing a volunteer t-shirt and smiling genuinely. She wrote inside that she was volunteering with a women's shelter and had found purpose in helping others going through difficult transitions. She thanked us for the photo and said Emma's smile reminded her of her own daughter at that age. Halloween 2024 was even bigger than the previous year. The neighborhood had fully embraced the holiday spirit. More than 20 houses had elaborate decorations. The community organized a walking tour where families could stroll through the streets looking at all the displays. We handed out maps with participating houses marked. Over 500 trick-or-treaters came through that night. Emma and her friend Sophia from school took turns helping me hand out candy. At one point, the line of kids stretched so far that Marcus and his wife came over with extra candy supplies to help us keep up. Around 8:30, a news van pulled up. The same reporter who'd covered the story the previous year wanted to do an anniversary follow-up. I gave a brief interview, emphasizing how the community had come together and how positive change was possible when people engaged constructively. The segment aired the next day with the headline, "1 year later, the Halloween house that changed a neighborhood still bringing joy." Life continued beyond Halloween. The holidays came and went. The HOA kept functioning smoothly under Linda's leadership. I remained on the board, focusing on making sure we served the community rather than burdening it with unnecessary restrictions. In February 2025, I attended a regional HOA conference that James Rodriguez had recommended. It was full of board members, property managers, and attorneys discussing best practices for homeowner associations. I was shocked by how many people approached me, recognizing my name from the news coverage of the Halloween decoration controversy. I ended up on an impromptu panel discussion about balancing community standards with individual freedom. Other panelists included an attorney, a property management company owner, and a community organizer. I was easily the least qualified person there, but the moderator kept directing questions to me because my experience had been so widely publicized. "What advice would you give to HOA board members?" someone from the audience asked. I thought about it carefully before responding. Remember that you're managing a community, not a kingdom. Your job is to maintain property values and ensure safety, not to control every aspect of how people live. Before enforcing a rule, ask yourself if it's actually necessary or if you're just imposing your personal preferences. And most importantly, enforce rules consistently. Selective enforcement is how you end up with the kind of conflict my neighborhood experienced. The answer got applause, which felt surreal. A woman approached me during the break. "I'm dealing with a similar situation in my HOA. The president has it out for me and keeps issuing bogus violations. What should I do?" I walked her through the steps I'd taken. Document everything, know your bylaws, gather evidence of inconsistent enforcement, request a formal hearing, seek community support. I gave her my email address and told her to reach out if she needed help navigating the process. Over the next few months, I heard from dozens of people through that website I'd created and through contacts made at the conference. Some situations resolved positively. Others ended up in legal battles or with people reluctantly selling their homes to escape tyrannical HOAs. The problem was widespread, and my individual experience couldn't fix systemic issues. But maybe sharing what I'd learned could help some people avoid the worst outcomes. By spring 2025, life in Maple Grove had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The HOA operated efficiently and fairly. Neighborhood events were well attended. Property values had actually increased, not because of strict rule enforcement, but because the community had become a desirable place to live where people felt welcomed and supported. Emma turned 9 in April. For her birthday party, we invited a dozen of her friends to the house. As I watched them play in the backyard, I reflected on how much had changed since that certified letter arrived 18 months earlier. I'd learned that standing up for yourself matters, even when it's uncomfortable. I'd learned that communities function best when people engage actively, rather than passively accepting whatever rules are imposed. I'd learned that even people who seem unreasonable often have their own struggles and pain driving their behavior. Most importantly, I'd learned that doing something simple with love, putting up Halloween decorations with my daughter, could unexpectedly become a catalyst for positive change that extended far beyond my own front yard. The Halloween decoration controversy that had seemed like such a nightmare at the time had ultimately made my neighborhood stronger, my relationship with Emma closer, and given me a platform to help others dealing with similar challenges. Not bad for an inflatable Grim Reaper and some plastic tombstones. As summer arrived and we started planning what decorations to add for Halloween 2025, I knew one thing for certain. That 12-foot Grim Reaper was staying right where it belonged, proudly displayed in my front yard every October. Not because I was trying to make a statement or prove a point, but because it represented something Emma and I loved doing together. And in the end, that's what really mattered. The neighborhood had voted it the best display, the internet had rallied behind it, and the HOA had learned an important lesson about overreach and accountability. But beyond all that, those decorations were a symbol of a father and daughter spending time together, creating joy, and refusing to let petty complaints diminish the things that made them happy. That was worth fighting for. That was worth standing up to an unreasonable HOA president and dealing with all the stress and attention that followed. Because at the end of the day, life isn't about following arbitrary rules or avoiding conflict at all costs. It's about protecting the things that matter, standing up for what's right, and building communities where people can thrive. The Grim Reaper would return every October. Emma and I would keep adding our creative touches, and the neighborhood would continue being a place where Halloween decorations were celebrated rather than condemned. And maybe, just maybe, our story would inspire a few more people to push back against unreasonable rules and create positive change in their own communities.